It's officially late July. The trade deadline is in just about a week. And does anybody want to be a National League wild card team?
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB with a Locked On Diamondbacks crossover for the 24th day of July, 2023. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I'm an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for over a decade now, and this is my fifth season here at the Locked On Podcast Network. And not just on this show, this whole week, I'm going to be doing guest spots for Locked On Rockies as well. Not as a guest, but as the host. So if you like your pal Sully and your earbuds, also subscribe to Locked On Rockies. We're having a lot of fun over there. But this is not a Locked On Rockies crossover. This is a Locked On Diamondbacks crossover. And right over there is my weekly partner, mystery guest. Sign in, please.
Yeah, Miller Thomas here, checking in, host of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. You can follow me on Twitter, my personal account at CreatorThomas24. Follow the show account, Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter and Instagram. And please hit subscribe to both our YouTube channels, Locked On Diamondbacks and Locked On MLB on YouTube.
All right. And hey, by the way, we have on the trivia question from the other day. We have ourselves a correct answer. The question was, who was the only person to win an American League batting title? And in the year where they won the batting title, they did not hit a home run that whole season. Now, we had someone Scott Campbell had a great answer to it. It was wrong, but he had a great answer to it. He thought it was Willie McGee, who actually won the National League batting title that year, but finished the year on the American League with the A's and didn't hit a home run for the A's. So he thought that I was trying to play a little bit of a three-card Monty with the question. He said, nope, that's some good knowledge there. But the fact of the matter is he did hit home runs while winning the batting title for the Cardinals that year. The answer is Rod Carew.
Whoa.
Rod Carew won the batting title, one of his many batting titles that he won. And I believe it was in 1973 one. He did not hit a home run all year long. By the way, a friend of the podcast, Gar Reness, who was actually the first ever guest I ever had on the old Sully Baseball podcast. He's better known as Batting Stance Guy, where he has an amazing set of videos where he perfectly mimics people's batting stances. He appeared on David Letterman doing that. He's been invited to major league clubhouses where there's videos of him imitating the different batting stances, and the like uproarious laughter of the other players as he's spot on. He says it's the least marketable skill he's ever seen, and he's a buddy of mine. We watch World Series games together. And when he was on Letterman, I may post this clip on Sully Baseball. He was on Letterman when Letterman, who of course is a huge baseball fan, would be yelling out specific players. Most of them were stars from the 70s and 80s, like do Joe Morgan, do Willie Stargell. And when he did his Rod Carew, he said Rod Carew was so relaxed when he was at the plate. He said it's believed that a couple times he actually fell asleep while he was at bat, to sort of just not waking up, and just holds the bat so gently. But when I was a kid, I know Rod Carew is before your time.
A little bit.
I did there was one year, it's 2017, I did a baseball card of the day every day on the old Sully Baseball blog. And I posted the card of the back-to-back years of the first 2 years I really collected baseball cards. You had Rod Carew and Dave Parker were the batting champions. The first year I collected baseball cards, and the second year I collected baseball cards. So it said batting champions, Rod Carew, Dave Parker. Next year, batting champions, Rod Carew, Dave Parker. And I just assumed, well, that's what happens every year. That had nothing. It almost had nothing to do with their accomplishment. It said that's their title. They're the batting champion. Just like the first 2 years, the home run kings of the National League was George Foster and Jim Rice in the American League. Next year, same two. So like, well, I guess that's how it is. Every year, Rod Carew leads the league in hitting, and Jim Rice leads the league in home runs, and Dave Parker and George Foster. Little did I know. But anyway, that's a little Rod Carew, and that's what the answer to that is. We're going to have another trivia question, which, by the way, is the same trivia question I posted on Locked On Rockies. So I'm going to see if people on Locked On MLB or Locked On Rockies gets my upcoming trivia question down. Okay, let's talk a little bit about wild card races. Hey, Millard, you follow the Diamondbacks for the wonderful Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let me ask you a loaded question, shall I?
Yes, sir.
How do you think the Rockies have done recently?
Oh, God. The Colorado Rockies, I'm not going to lie to you. They're not a team I'm checking on too often when it comes to the standings. I'm looking at the NL wildcard race right now. The Rockies are sitting dead last in that standing race.
But they've also not lost a series since the All-Star break, and they've done nothing but play contenders. In other words, the Rockies are the king of the upsetters, which brings us to the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks are currently a playoff team. How are they doing?
It doesn't feel like they might be a playoff team for long, Sully Baseball, because they've been struggling since about mid-June here.
Yeah, but here's the deal. Though the Diamondbacks just got swept. All right?
Don't remind me.
They're on a 4-game losing streak. They've lost 8 of their last 10 games. But guess what? The Giants have been awful too. The Giants got swept by the Nationals. They got smacked around. They got taken to the woodshed. And not only that, but the Marlins won an extra inning game in the bottom of the 10th today only because Bud Black fell asleep like Rod Carew during the middle of an at-bat and managed the 10th inning as badly as he could. But before that, the Marlins had been, as I knock my headset around, on an 8-game losing streak. And not to be outdone, the Philadelphia Phillies, who did manage to pull off an extra inning win to the against Cleveland today, but they've been on a disastrous losing streak. Nobody wants to win. Do you know who the team with the top wild card team is as of this recording? Do you know who it is?
I do, unfortunately, because they swept my team this week.
The Reds, who a week ago were on the outside looking in. And now they'd have home field advantage. Now, granted, 1 game in the loss column separates first place. Into when I say first place, I mean in the wild card. First place Cincinnati and 5th place Miami. 1 game in the loss column separates Cincinnati, Arizona, San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Miami. And here's the weird part. Only 4 games in the loss column behind them are the freaking Cubs, who are selling. Now, no, you just smirked because, they're not going to win anything. But what if all these other teams are on a free fall? Then you're like, holy Toledo. It may open the door for one of these teams. What's going on with the D-backs and what's going on with all these teams that don't seem to want to be part of the wild card chase?
I don't know. I mean, at least for the D-backs, I got such tunnel vision on that team. I know they've just been terrible against these at least 500 or better teams since mid-June. But because I watch the D-backs every day, it just feels like my world is falling apart. But you did help me out here, Sully Baseball, putting into perspective that it's not just the D-backs are struggling. It's everyone in that NL wildcard race. And so that helps me a little bit with knowing that the season's still long and the D-backs are going to be in the thick of the race. And I actually want to see, it's kind of more fun that all these teams are struggling together because your team loses, you feel demoralized, but then you look at the standings and you're like, oh, nothing has changed. So you can still keep the same kind of positive attitude they might have had, a couple weeks ago. But I'm really just curious to see how these teams are going to approach the deadline because all these teams are right in the mix, but no one exactly is pulling themselves away right now. So how do these front offices evaluate their own clubs and say, you know what, this team is good enough to make a deep postseason run. Let's add a couple more pieces. Or you're going to be like the Miami Marlins. We're going to try to get in there naturally, but we're not going to be sellers. We're not going to be buyers. We're just going to stand pat and just let this season play out. I want to see what's going to happen. You mentioned the Cubs. I still think they're going to be big sellers, but in a week and a half, if they're still if they're 3.5 out, I don't know what they're going to do. This NL wildcard race is going to be fascinating as we approach the deadline.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that because I have some real thoughts about some of the teams that are in free fall that could really help themselves at the deadline, and two teams who must be looking at this free fall and smacking themselves right in the head. But first,
I need to talk to our listeners about this little app called Sleeper, because do you think Corbin Carroll or Jordan Alvarez, I guess he's hurt right now, how about Vlad Guerrero Jr.? Do you think those guys could hit a home run tonight? Well, if you do, you should go to Sleeper, because right now they're doing 100 times payouts. You can choose 2 or more players. You can select up to 8 guys. You can choose stat categories as well, like home runs, strikeouts, hit, and more. And if you get your picks right, you can win big. Sleeper is a fantasy sports plus real money gaming app focused on bringing people together through sports and gaming. Sleeper has become the fastest organically growing fantasy platform in the world with over 5 million active users. Sully Baseball, if you're looking at the YouTube video, has it up on his screen right now. It's great for daily fantasy baseball. And the reason why I love Sleeper personally is because when that football season rolls around, I do a dynasty league on the Sleeper app. It keeps track of all your players. Look at that. You can see Yoshida right now on the Sleeper app on Sully Baseball screen. Such an easy platform to use. I absolutely love it. So
easy. Even Sully can use it.
Even Sully can use it. And that man, I don't know if you guys know this, but Sully's over 50 years old. So they get a little technologically,
Back in my day, we played the Stratomatic while eating a rotisserie chicken.
Yeah, Sully used to play games on the typewriter. So now that we got the Sleeper app, Sully can take his gaming to the next level. So use promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today.
Ty Cobb will get 2 hits. Walter Johnson will strike out 5. That was how I started doing the fantasy baseball. Cy Young will get to 8 innings. Stop. Christy Mathewson will strike out 10. Stop.
I can't even imagine doing fantasy baseball in the 90s and like having to mail each other like fantasy.
That's one of the reasons why I didn't do it. Like so many people try to get me into fantasy, and it was just like I have to, go to the. Here we go. Oh boy, I got my picks here. I'm gonna take. I can't wait to get them in. Oh cripes. I hope I get Kirby Puckett on my team today. I hope he gets a hit. And then they would get it back and it'd be typed out like a mimeograph, like there. It would just be like one of those letters you got back from the War Department in during World War II. By the way, saw Oppenheimer.
Oh, I'm waiting. It's so like hard to see. Like every seat is filled for like the next week. I'm trying to wait for like that 70 millimeter IMAX. Would you go to see it?
I didn't see it 70 millimeter. I wanted to go see it this weekend. All the best jokes are in the trailer. I mean, if you're looking for it to be really funny, like all the funny parts are in the trailer.
Okay.
So.
Just serious and gritty.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, it's very good. Surprising. Christopher Nolan made a good movie, but it's intense.
It's double feature for you with Barbie? No Barbenheimer?
I almost had to see Barbie afterwards just to sort of relax a little bit. But instead I watched baseball, and let's get back to that. I'll tell you, 2 teams that must be looking at this free fall from the National League wild card with absolute agony have to be the Padres and the Mets. Mm-hmm. When you think about the star power that they put together, the fact that they're 2 of the 3 highest payrolls in baseball, if you had told them that there would be a bunch of upstart teams, that suddenly those carriages are turning into pumpkins right around the trade deadline, and like, look at, a lot of people were picking the Mets and San Diego to win the division. I think I picked San Diego to win the division. I was duped. I picked it. I know I picked Atlanta to win the division, but I do believe I flipped the coin. I thought it was going to be that close. You're looking at these teams like San Francisco, your boys. You're looking at, Cincinnati, who went on a huge slump until recently. You're looking at the slump that, Philadelphia went on, that Miami went on. I mean, if all the Mets and the Padres had to do was be around 500 right around now, they would be in an absolute phenomenal position to add to the team and punch their cards and get into the playoffs and take their chances. I know both teams had visions of winning a pennant dancing in their head, but you don't put together a star-studded team like they had and think, oh cripes, I hope we're the visiting wild card team. But you take that now. But now they can't. They're not even. I mean, as of this, full disclosure, we're recording this before the Mets Red Sox game. So you people listening in the future, you know what happened in that game. But even if the Mets win that game 20-0 and it's a perfect game, they'll still be sub 500. They'll still be 5 games under 500. Best case scenario is they're going into this week 6.5 games out. I'm sorry. I don't care what free fall people are in front of you. It's tough to make up 6.5 games.
It's tough, but if we think a team like the Chicago Cubs at 5.5 games is still in the race, then we gotta believe a team like the Padres with that quartet that they have in their lineup. Maybe the New York Mets, I feel a little bit more. I feel less optimistic about, just because their pitchers are just so old and they're starting to look like they might be hitting a little bit of the decline a little bit. But the Padres have real talent still in their prime. I think you can still convince yourself in the second half. They still have upside. There's still upward trajectory there with the Padres. I don't feel the same way about the New York Mets, but hey, if we check back in a day before the deadline and the Padres are like 3.5 back, I find it hard. A guy like AJ Preller, who's been super aggressive, doesn't try to make moves. Now, maybe that's selling off some pieces, because there's been some rumors that a guy like Blake Snell, who's an impending free agent, who's having a fantastic season, could be moved, or a guy like Josh Hader, who's also an impending free agent, could be moved. Like, both of those teams are the perfect teams to go and pick off pieces if you're trying to make a deep postseason run. Like, you got your Verlanders and the Scherzers in the Mets rotation. You got pieces like the Blake Snell and the Padres rotation. But how do those teams, the Padres and Mets, feel about selling after spending all this money in the last couple off seasons, after being so aggressive? Do they just want to give up and have a fire sale at the deadline? I feel like a guy like Stephen Cohen doesn't want to do that in terms of dignity. So I'm very curious to see how all these teams are going to attack the deadline.
I think it has to go this week. Like right now, the Padres are going to be playing this week. They're going to be playing Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh has been in a tailspin.
Awful.
Now, what Padres and Mets have to go on, not win a series. They have to go on like a 6 or 7 game winning streak.
Mm-hmm.
They have to go on a roll. Now, the Pirates have been pretty bad. And if San Diego, who are throwing Snell in their next game, they don't play, they have an off day on Monday. If San Diego could start getting on a roll, then I don't think they'll do any selling. I only brought up the Cubs. I don't think the Cubs are a contender. They're a sub 500 team in late July. They should be thinking about selling. They should be thinking about opening up as much salary space and then start singing overtures to Shohei Ohtani over in the offseason. The Mets are the team that's in the real interesting spot, because they're about to play the Yankees. Now, the Yankees just finished sweeping Kansas City, and the first game was super tight. Yankees got amazing infield defense on the game on Friday that basically saved the game, because if they went from getting swept by losing the series to Colorado, getting swept by the Angels, and losing game 1 to Kansas City, oh my God, there would be pitchforks and torches. They held on for dear life on Friday, and then won Saturday pretty easily, and then had a late rally on Sunday to finish the sweep. They did what they had to do. If we've been trashing the Yankees for losing these games they've done before, you got to at least praise them a little bit for saying they had 3 games against a team they should have beat, and they freaking swept them. And so they did that. Now, have they righted the ship, or are the Royals just that bad?
Bad.
And the Mets are going to play the Yankees. They have Verlander going against Herman. Herman, as we know, can be perfect, but most of the time he's not. Verlander has actually pitched pretty well recently. Mm-hmm. This game is critical for the Mets. They have to go on a run. Now, if they go on a 5-6 game winning streak, suddenly they're hovering back around 500, and the last wild card team is probably not going to be that much higher than 500 if recent weeks have been any indication. So for those two big budgeted teams, this is the most critical week of the season, because if they lose to the Yankees and the Padres stub their toe, then trade away Snell, and trade away Scherzer.
Yeah, we see teams like we saw this last year with like the Phillies who are really struggling the first half of the season. Then they get rolling the second half. You make the third wild card or the second wild card, and then you're on your way to the World Series. And for this New York Mets team, like if you're Stephen Cohen and this is year one of this fat payroll, you almost tried to get Carlos Correa. Like if this is year one where your payroll's anchored by like these two near 40 guys. I mean, Scherzer's already 40. Justin Verlander's like 39. If this is year one, like you said, Verlander's been pitching well recently, but this is not the Verlander that we saw last year. Like his strikeout numbers are way down. It doesn't seem like he looks more like a number 2 or number 3 starter right now. Scherzer doesn't even look like that number 1 guy that we've seen from the last few years. So if you're Stephen Cohen, this is year one of that payroll, and this is the results you're getting. I feel like you're probably more likely to sell those guys at the deadline if you could. Maybe just eat a little bit salary and get a couple pieces back. But like you said, the NL wildcard race, like those teams ahead of the Mets and Padres, they are struggling right now. Like you talked about, you need a 6 or 7 game winning streak from the Padres. Like that's realistic when you think about your team like the Miami Marlins, who just went on an 8 game losing streak. So if a team like the Marlins or the D-backs, who we felt so good about for the first half of the season, I thought my D-backs are rolling. I thought they're going to win the division. Now they've come crashing back to earth. And a team like the Padres, when you got the Machados of the world struggling, you got the Bogarts of the world struggling, the Darvishes, you have so many stars on your team that you can say, you know what, a good second half from them, and maybe we could still make some noise. Maybe we could get to like 86, 87 wins and make the postseason. And once you get there, anything can happen. But these next 2 weeks are just absolutely critical. I mean, we're not going to go into the American League right now as well, because like the Angels. But these next 2 weeks are just such a big flashpoint for so many teams. Are they going to be sellers at the deadline, or teams are going to stand pat, or are they going to be buyers? I don't know if I've ever approached the deadline 2 weeks out where I'm like, half the league are either going to have a fire sale or they're going to try to pick off pieces from other rosters, because so many teams are just like in this no man's land of purgatory where they don't know what's up, what's down, and whether they should go be aggressive or not.
And we saw in just the last 2 years, at this point last year, the Phillies went on a big roll, and eventually they got all the way to the World Series. At this point last 2 years ago, Atlanta had a losing record and had lost Acuna for the season. And they made some smart moves, not high-profile moves, and they wound up. Both of those teams got all the way to the World Series. Obviously, Atlanta won the whole damn thing in 2021. Do I think? I mean, get in, just get in. But if the Padres and the Mets want to be the next name on that list of NL pennant winners who were out of it at this point, they better start winning right now.
Yeah, and with the Mets, I just don't feel good about their future. Like if they sell off a Scherzer and Verlander, I just don't know where they go from there. At least with the Padres, I still feel like they got this core in place. If they get, I don't even know what words you're saying. I might need to. Okay, there you go. I mean, I'm sure Stephen Cohen would be ready to just give him a blank check and say whatever you want. You'd be salivating in that free agent meeting with Shohei Ohtani. So if the New York Mets can save some money by selling off a Verlander or Scherzer, and then you bring Ohtani, sure, then their future, changes in my eyes. But I think at least for a San Diego Padres team right now, if you do sell off the Snells and the haters of the world, I still feel great with that lineup. I still feel like you'll still have a pretty strong rotation and a core pieces there. For the New York Mets, I don't know how I feel about that team moving forward if they start being sellers at the deadline.